Welcome to Private Fame. Tonight's story is about Lady Gaga. Not the pop icon, not the fashion legend, but the woman behind the fame, who had to invent an alter ego just to survive. For years, the spotlight loved her, but rarely asked who she really was. Behind the wigs, the makeup, and the headlines, there was Stephanie, trying to stay sane in a world that only wanted Gaga. To be adored by millions but feel invisible as yourself, why does it suck to live as Lady Gaga? Maybe because sometimes it's the only way Stefani could stay alive. If you're staying with me tonight, like the video, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to pretend just to get through the day. Before she was Lady Gaga, she was Stefani, a girl from New York, born with a piano under her fingers and something volcanic brewing under her skin. She wasn't like the others. Not in her school, not in her neighborhood, not in her body, not even in her silence. While other girls played along, Stefani watched, absorbed, wrote. There was something brewing in her. Rage, brilliance, pain. And she didn't know how to wear it in public without setting everything on fire. The world she grew up in had no place for the kind of girl she was becoming. From a young age, she felt things too much. Beauty stabbed, rejection roared. Her earliest memories weren't of applause, but of being othered. Too intense, too dramatic, too weird. So she did what sensitive, dangerous minds do when they don't fit. She built armor. And the name of that armor would one day become Lady Gaga. But back then, before the wigs and the applause, she was just Stephanie Germanotta, a teenager who couldn't stop writing songs because it was the only thing that let her stay sane. She walked into clubs that reeked of beer and self-loathing and sang as if she had something to prove to God himself. And maybe she did. Maybe it wasn't fame she was after, maybe it was witness. Just someone, anyone, to look her in the eyes and see her. And then it happened. The music industry opened a door, she stepped in, and almost immediately, the room tried to crush her. She was told she wasn't pretty enough. Her look was confusing. Her sound wasn't marketable. And just like that, she realized Stefani wasn't enough for this world. Not if she wanted to survive it. So she created Gaga, loud, surreal, armored in latex and glass, a warrior of the absurd. Gaga didn't flinch. Gaga didn't cry. Gaga didn't ask for approval. Gaga was the answer to a world that had no room for vulnerability. And it worked. Just Dance hit the airwaves like lightning, and suddenly Gaga was everywhere. In clubs, on the covers of magazines, crawling out of eggs at award shows, swinging from meat dresses and bleeding glitter. She became more than a pop star. She was a cultural phenomenon. Unignorable, uncontainable. A walking rebellion against expectation. But the thing about building an alter ego to protect yourself is that, eventually, you forget where she ends and you begin. Behind the makeup, Stefani was still there, and she was breaking. The pressure didn't stop with success, it got worse. Fame wasn't a reward, it was a chokehold. The higher she climbed, the more people wanted to tear her open. They wanted to see if the monster bled. And she did, quietly, constantly. She suffered from PTSD after being assaulted at 19. A trauma she buried under costumes and choruses until her body couldn't carry it anymore. The pain turned physical. Fibromyalgia, panic attacks, full body breakdowns. There were days she couldn't walk. Nights she wanted to disappear. Fame had become a gilded prison, and Gaga, her protector, had become a mask she could no longer remove without losing pieces of her skin. She once said, "I don't know where Gaga ends and I begin." That wasn't metaphor. That was survival fatigue. The public saw the shows, the headlines, the fame. They didn't see the pills, the therapy, the collapse, the suicidal thoughts, the loneliness. How it feels to be loved by millions but unable to love yourself in a dark room when the makeup's gone. And that's the paradox Gaga lived in. To stay alive, she had to become someone else. But to heal, she had to become herself again. And so began the slow, agonizing rebirth of Stefani Germanotta. Not by abandoning Gaga, but by reclaiming her, integrating her. Learning that Gaga wasn't just a mask, she was a part of her. A warrior born from trauma. An identity that helped her walk through hell without turning to stone. But now Stefani had to return, because no alter ego, no matter how fierce, can carry a soul forever. She started speaking, publicly, about trauma, pain, rape, chronic illness, self-harm. She told the truth with the kind of brutal clarity that made people uncomfortable, especially in an industry built on illusion. But that was her point. She didn't want applause anymore. She wanted understanding. Not for fame, but for survival. She founded the Born This Way Foundation. She wrote Joanne, a vulnerable, stripped album about grief, family, and the things we don't say out loud. Then Chromatica, a futuristic pop masterpiece that danced through agony with elegance. Every track a scream in disguise. Every note a battle cry wrapped in a beat. She wasn't healed, she was healing. And she let us hear every step. And the deeper you go into Stefani Germanotta's journey, the clearer it becomes that survival, real survival, is messy, non-linear, and often terrifying. After years of living inside the persona of Lady Gaga, she began to peel back the layers. But this wasn't some glamorous transformation where she shed her past and stepped into the light. It was brutal. It was slow. It was filled with relapse and doubt and days where she could barely get out of bed. Because fame doesn't leave the body easily. It lives in the bones. And the pressure to be Gaga, to perform, to shock, to please, haunted her long after the applause faded. She once said in an interview, "I hated being famous. I hated being a star. I felt exhausted and used up." That wasn't bitterness. That was grief. She was grieving her own life. The years she lost to pleasing everyone but herself. The silence she was forced to swallow. The trauma she buried beneath performance. At one point, she was so dissociated from herself she couldn't even remember why she made music. She would sit at the piano and feel nothing. Empty. She had built an empire out of her pain, but now the empire felt like a cage. That's the part of the story people don't see. How even the greatest success can hollow you out when it's built on survival mechanisms. But then something shifted. Not all at once, but in small, sacred ways. A conversation with her mother. A quiet morning without anxiety. A session in the studio where the melody actually felt right. She began writing music not to protect herself, but to express herself. She stopped trying to be impressive and started trying to be honest. And that changed everything. When A Star Is Born happened, it wasn't just a career milestone. It was a turning point in her spirit. Because for the first time in years, she was asked to be raw, not dazzling. The world saw her without the armor. No wigs, no theatrics. Just Stefani. Her voice cracked. Her face cried without hiding it. And audiences didn't run away. They leaned in. That was the moment she realized she didn't have to choose. She could be both. Gaga and Stefani. Power and pain. Performance and person. She didn't have to kill her creation to reclaim her soul. That's what makes her story extraordinary. Not the awards, not the fame, but the fact that she made it out. Not everyone does. We've seen what the industry does to people who feel too much. We've seen how it swallows the ones who can't breathe behind their stage names. But Lady Gaga, Stefani, she found a way to hold on to herself. Not perfectly, not neatly, but fully. Now, when she performs, you can feel the difference. The stage doesn't own her anymore, she owns it. Her movements are freer, her voice richer. Her energy, while no longer desperate to prove anything, pulses with self-possession. She's still Gaga. She still wears fire and feathers, but she doesn't disappear inside the costume. She stands tall within it. And when she steps off stage, she returns to herself. She gardens, she paints, she writes, she breathes. She shares her story not as a brand strategy, but as a form of rebellion. Because telling the truth about mental health, trauma, and survival in an industry that profits off your silence, that is rebellion. And the truth is, her story doesn't have an ending. It's not wrapped in a perfect bow. There's no final act where she declares she's healed and whole forever. Because that's not how real healing works. Some days are glorious, others ache, and that's okay. What matters is that she's still here. not just existing, living. And in doing so, she gives everyone permission to do the same. And what's perhaps most astonishing isn't just that she survived, but how she's choosing to live now. After years of measuring her worth by applause, streaming numbers, headlines, and ticket sales, Lady Gaga, Stefani, has found something far more rare in the world she once ruled: peace. Not the polished kind that looks good on camera, but the quiet, untweetable kind. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real. These days, she doesn't move through the world as if she's on display. She moves like a woman who's been to hell and came back with a map. She stopped chasing every opportunity. She says no to things that don't serve her spirit. She's not afraid to disappear when she needs to. She spends time with her dogs, away from red carpets. She surrounds herself with people who don't want Gaga, but Stefani, the woman beneath the fame. The one who still plays piano barefoot in her kitchen. The one who writes songs that never get released. The one who knows that silence is a sanctuary, not a failure. But don't mistake this softness for weakness. If anything, this is her strongest self yet. Because strength isn't always armor. Sometimes it's having the courage to remove it. To stand in front of the world not as a spectacle, but as a person. As someone who has loved deeply, been broken repeatedly, and rebuilt herself with gold in the cracks. That's what she's doing now. Living with the cracks visible, proud even, because they prove she made it through. She's still creating. But it's different now. The work is rooted, purposeful. Her beauty brand, her philanthropic work, her performances, they all pulse with intention. They're not just about transformation anymore. They're about integration. She's no longer trying to run from Stefani or hide behind Gaga. She's learned to let them sit at the same table. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. That sometimes, to survive this world, the cruelty, the pressure, the exposure, you have to create someone stronger than yourself. You have to build a persona that can take the blows you can't. Gaga was that for her. A shield. A sword. A voice when Stefani was voiceless. But the true triumph wasn't becoming Gaga. It was coming back from her. Learning to live again as Stefani. Not in spite of the pain, but with it. Her legacy won't just be the music, the fashion, or the performances. It will be this. She showed the world what it looks like when a woman refuses to be destroyed by her own invention. When she turns survival into art. When she takes the persona off, looks in the mirror, and loves the person who's still standing there. Lady Gaga didn't just reinvent pop music. She reinvented what it means to be seen. There's something sacred in the way Lady Gaga has learned to carry her pain. Not as a burden, not as baggage, but as material. She doesn't hide the fact that she's been broken. In fact, she sings it, she wears it, she lets it breathe through every note and movement. It's why her performances feel like more than music. They feel like exorcisms. She isn't just entertaining, she's purging. And in doing so, she gives permission to millions of people to do the same. But what most people don't realize is that this transformation wasn't inevitable. It was chosen. There were countless moments, especially after her body collapsed under the pressure of chronic pain and her mind collapsed under the weight of trauma, where she could have disappeared completely. Where the world would have understood if she walked away forever. Where Stefani could have folded under the persona she created and let Lady Gaga become the permanent mask. But she didn't. She did the harder thing. She stayed. In the pain. In the mess. In the contradiction of being both icon and human, both product and person, both the voice of empowerment and someone still fighting to empower herself. There's something deeply moving about how she's taken the darkest parts of her past, the rape, the PTSD, the depression, the suicidal ideation, the physical agony of fibromyalgia, and turned them into currency for healing. Not just her own, but everyone's. She doesn't speak about these things as a marketing tool. She speaks about them because she knows silence kills. and she refuses to be complicit in that silence anymore. That's why when she performs songs like Till It Happens to You, she's not playing a role. She's standing in the ashes of her own experience and singing not to impress, but to connect. She's said before that writing that song brought her to tears repeatedly in the studio. And you can feel it, because she's not reaching for sympathy. She's offering solidarity. And as her voice has grown more confident in speaking about these things, something else has shifted too: the industry. When Gaga started being open about mental health, trauma, and chronic illness, people didn't know what to do with it. Pop stars were supposed to be glamorous and untouchable, not raw and trembling. But she didn't care. She said it anyway. And now, you hear echoes of her bravery in every artist who dares to say, "I'm not okay." She changed the rules. And now, in her late 30s, she's moving into a different era, one that's not about reinvention, but integration. She doesn't need to shock anymore. She doesn't need to prove herself with every outfit, every performance, every award. She's transcended that. What matters now is truth, the kind you don't post, the kind that lives quietly. She's building something beyond fame, legacy. And not the kind etched in record sales or Grammys, the kind etched in lives saved. That's the part people won't always see. The impact of her honesty in the lives of people who watched her, heard her, and finally saw themselves. In her pain, in her strength, in her weirdness, in her survival. Lady Gaga didn't just invent a persona, she invented a lifeline. First for herself, then for everyone else. And perhaps what defines Lady Gaga more than anything now is in her past glory or the iconic images that once dominated culture. The meat dress, the metallic shoulder pads, the blood-stained VMA performance, but the quieter, more grounded power she's cultivated in the years since. Because to watch her now is to witness a woman who has climbed out of her own mythology. She's no longer just the voice of rebellion. She is the echo of recovery, the living embodiment of what it looks like to find yourself again after being torn apart by the very dreams that once gave you purpose. She once dreamed of being famous because she believed that fame would save her. That if she could just be seen enough, loud enough, loved enough, she would finally silence the screaming insecurity in her chest. But when she reached the top, when she was arguably the biggest name in music, she discovered the most painful truth of all. Fame doesn't cure loneliness. In many ways, it magnifies it. It took nearly losing herself completely for her to learn how to protect what matters. Not the image, not the perfection, but the truth. The sacred, bruised, imperfect truth that lives beneath the glitter and the spectacle. That's what you feel now when you hear her speak. Not a star, but a survivor. Not someone trying to impress you, but someone trying to reach you from the other side of something terrible. She talks openly about her mental health not as a cause, but as a condition of life. She doesn't romanticize trauma. She dismantles the shame around it. She reminds people that even the biggest names can fall apart. And more importantly, that falling apart doesn't mean the end. When she began working on Chromatica, it wasn't about pop stardom. It was about stitching herself back together. Every track on that album is a wound dressed in synths. It's her confession that even in joy, there is sorrow. That even in dance, there is pain. That even when you're performing to millions, you can still feel completely alone. But she kept going. And in doing so, she redefined what strength looks like. Because strength isn't the absence of breakdown. It's the willingness to come back from one. To keep coming back. Again and again. And now, she's not chasing the spotlight. She walks into it only when she wants to. She's not trying to dominate culture. She's trying to live well. She cooks. She writes. She paints. She falls in love without making it a headline. She works with people who respect her. She rests. And maybe most radically of all, she's learning how to be happy. That's the evolution we don't talk about enough. Not the comeback, not the rebrand, but the quiet decision to choose life over legacy, peace over performance. Because the girl who once needed to become someone else to survive now trusts that who she is enough. And that is not the end of her story. It's the beginning of something far more powerful. Because maybe, in the end, that's the real masterpiece Lady Gaga has been building this whole time. Not just her career, not her albums or her tours or her awards, but herself. A woman not defined by the pain she endured, but by the choices she made in response to it. A woman who stood on the edge of disappearing into the very persona she created, and instead decided to turn inward, to reclaim the girl she once had to hide. For years, Stefani Germanotta was buried under the weight of Gaga, not because Gaga was false, but because she was armor. And armor, even the most beautiful kind, becomes unbearable when worn too long. It isolates, it exhausts, it makes you forget that you were never meant to be protected forever. You were meant to heal. And Gaga healed. Quietly, messily, defiantly. She allowed herself to grieve the things she lost along the way. The years of disassociation. The trust stolen from her body. The people who couldn't stay through the storm. The version of herself she had to abandon to become who the world needed. She grieved them out loud so others would feel less alone. And in that grief, in that honesty, something holy happened. People began to see her. Not as a symbol. Not as a celebrity. But as a mirror. Because that's what she is now. A mirror for anyone who's ever felt like too much or not enough. For anyone who's performed their way through heartbreak, danced through depression, smiled through soul-deep pain. She gave all of them a language, a sound, a vision, a hand in the dark. She became the kind of artist who doesn't just entertain you, she liberates you. Not with perfection, but with permission. The permission to feel, to break, to rebuild, to be beautiful and broken, powerful and tender, loud and uncertain. That's what makes her legacy bigger than music. She didn't just leave a mark on pop culture. She left a blueprint for how to survive it. And now, the woman who once begged the world to look at her now knows she doesn't need the world's gaze to feel whole. She knows who she is when the lights are off, when the show ends, when the fans go home, when she's just Stefani sitting at her piano whispering songs into the night. She doesn't need to be Lady Gaga to matter, but she chooses to be her, fully, freely, joyfully, because now she doesn't wear Gaga like armor. She wears her like skin. And so now, when she steps on stage, it's not to hide anymore, it's to reveal. Every movement, every note, every glance into the crowd isn't just performance, it's communion. It's Stefani and Gaga merged, no longer fighting for control but dancing together. The costume doesn't erase her anymore, it expresses her. The makeup doesn't conceal her sadness, it honors it, transforms it, makes it art. She's no longer pretending to be strong, she is strong precisely because she's allowed herself to be weak. She's no longer performing freedom, she's living it. She's no longer asking, "Do you love me?" She's asking, "Do you love yourself enough to let go of who you were told to be?" This is the true legacy she's building, not in billboards or broken records, but in hearts. In how her story gives other people permission to step out of their masks. In how her breakdowns, so painfully public, became blueprints for healing. And in how she turned fame, the very thing that nearly devoured her, into a platform for radical, defiant honesty. She doesn't seek headlines now. She lets her silence speak louder than spectacle. When she disappears from the public eye, she isn't gone. She's recharging, living, grounding. Because she knows now that rest isn't weakness. It's rebellion. And coming back, not to prove anything, but because she wants to, is power. There's a look in her eyes now that didn't used to be there. Not fear, not performance, not calculation. It's peace. The kind that only comes after surviving yourself. After forgiving yourself for the times you couldn't keep going. After choosing to love the girl who was told she had to become someone else to be worthy. Lady Gaga has lived through what many don't survive. Assault, addiction, illness, public humiliation, spiritual collapse. And yet here she is, not unchanged, not untouched, not unscarred, but undefeated. She is a testament to what happens when the performance ends and the person finally steps forward, not asking to be worshipped, but to be witnessed. So if you ask now, who is Lady Gaga? The answer is no longer just wigs, beats, and spectacles. Lady Gaga is the scream that became a song, the wound that became a stage, the girl who became her own rescue. And if there's one truth that echoes through every corner of her journey, it's this. She was never just performing. Not really. Beneath every glittering mask, behind every elaborate stage set, through every over-the-top ensemble and impossible heel, there was always a girl who was trying to feel safe enough to be seen. A girl trying to protect the part of her heart that still hurt when no one was looking. Because Gaga, the myth, the icon, the phenomenon, she was never a lie. She was a shield. A brilliant, powerful, dazzling shield built by someone who had been hurt so deeply, so early that the only way to survive was to shine brighter than the pain. But now that shield has softened. Now, when she speaks, it's not just to stun, it's to connect. To make sure that the kid watching in some small town who doesn't feel like they belong, who's carrying too much grief, too much anger, too much difference, knows they're not alone. Her concerts are still electric. Her voice still shakes the walls. But there's something else there now. Something more enduring than fame. Intimacy. Her fans don't just scream for her because she's a pop star. They cry with her. They hold up signs that say, "You saved my life." And she doesn't just take the compliment. She sends it back. Because she knows the truth, they saved her too. In a world that wanted her to choose, artist or activist, feminine or fierce, strange or sexy, survivor or siren, she refused the binary. She said yes to all of it. She held every piece of herself, even the ones she was taught to hide, and turned them into performance, into poetry, into power. And now she moves forward on her own terms. Her music isn't rushed. Her albums come when they're ready. Her appearances are intentional. She's still Lady Gaga, but not because she has to be. Because she chooses to be. Because Gaga no longer owns her. She owns herself. That's the quiet revolution of her life. Not that she made it to the top, but that once she got there and realized it didn't fix what was broken, she climbed all the way back down, into her own skin, into her family, into silence, into healing, and found something far more valuable, wholeness. She no longer walks like someone trying to be watched. There is no more hunger for validation in her posture, no residue of desperation in her voice. The same woman who once begged to be understood in 3-minute songs now carries a quiet knowing that she was never meant to be decoded. She was meant to be felt. She doesn't need to be loud anymore, because her silence holds more weight than a chart-topping chorus ever did. There is power in that kind of stillness, the kind that comes only after you've survived yourself. The fame machine, the relentless cycle of tours, interviews, appearances, endorsement deals, rehearsals, rewrites, rewires, it doesn't own her anymore, not because she walked away from it, but because she learned how to look it in the face and say, "You do not define me." She can step into it when she wants to, and vanish when she doesn't. That's a kind of luxury the industry rarely grants. But Gaga didn't wait for permission. She carved that freedom out of pain, out of resistance, out of years of waking up and wondering if she could bear to be Gaga for one more day. Because there was a time, not long ago, when even she wasn't sure if she wanted to be here anymore. When the glitz meant nothing. When applause sounded like static. When she looked into the mirror and couldn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because of the makeup or the wigs or the image, but because she had become a stranger to her own soul. That kind of loss doesn't happen overnight. It builds quietly day by day, as you abandon little pieces of yourself to meet expectation. And suddenly, you're a ghost inside your own skin. But she did the unthinkable. She went back for herself. She turned around and found the girl she'd left behind. The one who used to write lyrics in spiral notebooks. The one who played piano barefoot at 15. The one who wasn't trying to be a star, just trying to make sense of the chaos inside her. That girl had been waiting. And Stefani went home to her. Not to start over, but to start right. That's why her art sounds different now. Not because she lost her edge, but because she gained her center. She no longer needs every song to break the radio. She needs it to mean something. She doesn't perform to survive anymore. She performs to feel. Every note she sings now is a tether to herself, not a cry for approval. Every melody is a message to the younger version of her, the one who was terrified she'd disappear without being loved. She sings to her now, like a lullaby from the future. And her fans, they've grown with her. They don't worship the glitter anymore. They follow the truth. They don't need her to be outrageous. They just want her to be here. Because when you love an artist for their humanity, not their mythology, you stay. Even through the quiet seasons, especially through the quiet seasons, that's what she's built. Not just a fandom, but a community. A world where outcasts belong, where survivors are sacred, where weirdness is a superpower, not a weakness. And it's no longer a performance. It's a sanctuary. Not every artist reaches that level. Most don't even try. But Gaga, Stefani, she bled for it. She fell apart for it. She risked being forgotten, being misunderstood, being cast out by the machine, just to find herself again. And now that she has, she's more powerful than ever, not because the world finally understands her, but because she no longer needs it to. Because the truth is, this version of Lady Gaga, the one that stands not on a stage, but in full awareness of who she's become, is the most dangerous and sacred of all. Not dangerous in the way tabloids used to define her, with their headlines about controversy and spectacle, but dangerous to a system that feeds on insecurity, on constant productivity, on women who stay small, exhausted, and eager to please. She's no longer a threat because she's loud. She's a threat because she no longer needs to perform for anyone's comfort. And it's not just in what she says, but in what she does not say. The interviews she turns down. The cameras she allows only so close. The way she doesn't explain every transformation anymore. She's not mysterious because she's calculated. She's mysterious because she's finally private. There is something quietly revolutionary about a woman the world once devoured, deciding she will now feed herself first. When you think about it, the greatest costume she ever wore wasn't the meat dress or the alien queen armor or the black veil stitched with rage. It was the smile. The one she wore when she was in pain. The one she flashed during interviews while fighting panic attacks in her trailer. The one that said, "I'm fine," when her body was screaming. That smile, that mask, that was her real protection. And when she finally let it drop, when she admitted the truth, when she showed up shaking, raw, undone, and said, "I don't want to live like this anymore," that was the bravest thing she's ever done. And from that place, everything changed. The music became medicine. The costumes became symbols, not shields. The voice carried a different frequency, one not just tuned to fame, but to healing. Even the way she looks at her fans changed. It's not adoration, it's not distance, it's recognition. Like, I know what you carry because I carry it too. And that kind of connection can't be manufactured. It's earned. In silence, in survival, in still being here when you had every reason not to be. She once said that when she felt the most broken, what saved her wasn't music. It was presence, sitting still, feeling the pain, letting it move through her without turning it into something for the world to consume. That's the part we forget. Not everything needs to be content. Some things need to just be felt. And Lady Gaga, once the queen of performance, has become the priestess of presence. She's no longer afraid of her story. She carries it like a second spine. And not because it's all been resolved, but because she knows now that the story doesn't need to be over to be beautiful. Some healing never ends. Some wounds never fully close, but they don't have to. You can still walk with them. You can still dance. And so she does. There's something about watching a woman who was once caged by the very dream she chased finally step into her own life, not as an act, not as a brand, but as a full sovereign being. that feels holy. It feels like witnessing a storm calm itself, like watching a cathedral of noise learn how to echo silence. Lady Gaga didn't just survive fame, she transcended it. And in doing so, she broke the mold for every artist who came after her. Because what she's living now is not just a quiet life, it's a self-defined one. The industry still calls, still knocks, still tries to pull her back into the machine. But she answers only when she chooses. There's no more hunger in her eyes. There's clarity, she doesn't chase relevance, she doesn't bend to the algorithm. She releases music when it's ready, not when the market says it's time. She appears where she feels called, not where she's told to be seen. And that's not retreat. That's mastery. People used to praise her for being fearless. But the truth is Gaga was never fearless. She was terrified, often. She said it. She's wept it. But she acted anyway. She got up anyway. She gave her heart anyway. And that's real courage. Not the absence of fear, but walking through it, fully aware it might break you. And it did. For a time. But what rose in its place, after the pain, after the collapse, after the healing, is someone who no longer fears being broken. Because she knows now, the cracks are where her truth lives, where her light gets in. So she wears her scars like threadwork. They're stitched into her performances, her voice, her laughter. They're in every pause between songs, every raw, unfiltered moment when she stops trying to be anything and just is. That's the Gaga we see now. Not an icon perched on a pedestal, but a woman who's descended into herself and returned with stories, wounds, and an unapologetic soul. She's teaching us all something, without preaching it. She's showing it. That reinvention isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And choosing her again, every day. That's why the next era of Lady Gaga, whatever form it takes, will not be about dominance. It will be about depth. Whether it's film, music, advocacy, art, or simply being still in her own joy, it will be intentional. And it will matter. Not because it's loud, but because it's true. So here she stands now, not in front of flashing cameras, not under the heat of a spotlight, but in the quiet of her own becoming. And the silence is not empty. It is full. Full of everything she once ran from: fear, pain, memory, love, softness, the sound of her own heartbeat when no one is clapping. Stephanie Germanotta no longer needs to be louder than her past. She sits beside it now, calmly. She doesn't deny it. She doesn't let it control her. She simply knows it, intimately. And that knowing is her new strength. There was a time when she had to scream to be heard, to wear something outrageous just to take up space in a room designed to erase women like her. But now her power comes from restraint, from grace, from boundaries, from the slow, deliberate movements of a woman who has absolutely nothing left to prove, not to her fans, not to the media, not to the men who underestimated her, not even to herself. Because what she knows now is this: the performance that matters most is the one nobody sees. She is not the same girl who crawled through the clubs of New York, hungry to be seen. She honors that girl, fiercely, but she no longer lets her drive. That girl was survival. This woman is sovereignty. She still creates. She still performs. But now, every note she sings feels like a choice, not a plea. There is no desperation in her sound anymore, only invitation. Come feel with me. Come break with me. Come heal. Her concerts are no longer just shows, they're ceremonies. Her lyrics no longer chase the charts. They mark chapters in her evolution. When she releases a song now, it's like opening a letter she wrote to herself years ago, finally ready to be read. And that's the beauty of Lady Gaga now. She is no longer searching for an audience to complete her. She knows she was whole all along, every version of her. The girl at the piano, the woman in pain, the performer drenched in sweat and glitter, the activist, the lover, the quiet voice behind closed doors. All of them still live inside her, and none of them are pretending anymore. She taught us by example that we don't have to shed our personas to find ourselves. We just have to stop hiding behind them. We can let the myth walk beside us as long as it doesn't walk ahead of us. And in doing so, we return to our bodies, to our voices, to our truth. That's what Lady Gaga has done. She didn't just survive the fame, she outgrew it. She stepped into the next chapter with no costume change, no fireworks, just herself, whole and radiant in her own skin. That's the revolution. That's the art. That's the quiet, thunderous end of the performance. And when the lights go down, and the curtain falls, and the crowd is gone, she doesn't stand there waiting for applause. She breathes, she smiles, she goes home, to herself. And in that final invisible moment, the one the world doesn't witness, she removes the heels, she wipes off the makeup, not because she's tired of the character, but because the performance has served its purpose. It built the bridge, it made the pain speakable, it kept her alive. But now, she doesn't need to disappear behind the myth. Now, she returns to the woman she fought to find. She moves through her home not like a superstar, but like someone finally safe in her own breath. The silence isn't awkward anymore. It's holy. It cradles her. No cameras, no lines to memorize. Just her body, her voice, the hum of life in the background. Maybe her dogs curled up beside her. Maybe the smell of tea in the air. Maybe a piano waiting in the other room like an old friend that never left. She sits. Not to plan. Not to rehearse. To be. There's a freedom in her now that no award could give, and no crowd could take away. It's the kind of freedom you earn, one scar at a time, one unraveling at a time. She didn't reach peace by chasing it. She found it by standing still in the fire long enough for it to die out. And now, the ashes are hers. She keeps them. They remind her of what she walked through. This is not a comeback story. It's not a redemption arc. It's not even an ending. It's a return. To herself, to her roots, to her soul, not to the girl who started it all, but to the woman who knows why she survived. Lady Gaga isn't retiring. She's evolving. She's walking into the next part of her life not as a star desperate to shine, but as a human being who understands that real light comes from within and doesn't flicker when the world looks away. That's the legacy, not the performances, not the outfits, not the spectacle, but the quiet, burning truth of a woman who dared to become her own salvation. The world doesn't know how to be still. It spins, accelerates, demands. We are expected to show up faster, louder, shinier, to push, to post, to perform, but not her, not anymore. Lady Gaga has stepped off that stage, not in defeat, not even in exhaustion, but in quiet triumph. Not the kind the headlines will recognize, but the kind that lives in the bones. The kind that settles deep into the body when you finally stopped running, finally stopped hiding, finally stopped handing yourself away in exchange for love. She is not chasing legacy anymore. She's already living it. Not in trophies, not in statistics, not in stadiums sold out to strangers who scream her name, but in the soft, brave act of choosing to be real when being a myth was safer. The woman who once built a castle out of costumes now returns to the earth, barefoot, grounded, no longer trying to escape gravity, but learning how to belong to it. And that is more powerful than any reinvention, because there is nothing left to reinvent. She's already arrived. Not at perfection, at peace. She sleeps differently now, not as a woman bracing for tomorrow's noise, but as someone who has made amends with her past. She doesn't rehearse who to be. She doesn't audition for love. She doesn't beg her reflection to shapeshift into something more palatable. She simply is. And in that stillness, that undramatic, holy stillness, she is more compelling than ever. Because the real art was never the choreography or the wardrobe or the spectacle. The real art was this. A woman who was shattered by fame, rebuilt by pain, and reborn in silence. A woman who stood in front of millions and said, "This is what it looks like to break. This is what it looks like to come back." And now, as the world closes its eyes, as the lights fade and the final note lingers in the dark, she is not waiting to be remembered. She is not waiting for another standing ovation. She is resting finally, in the truth that she never needed to be anyone but herself. That is the performance. That is the revolution. That is the end and the beginning. So now, if you are listening, Let go of the noise. Close your eyes, let your breathing slow. You don't need to become anything right now. You are not unfinished. You are not too late. Tonight, you are simply here, alive, like her. And that is enough. Good night. Sleep well. Let the fire inside you crackle gently. Not to burn, but to warm. Let silence hold you like a song. The story continues, but for now, rest.